What's going on, all you wonderful A-plusers out there? It is I, Stuart, here once again with another Superman and Lois review. This time I'm going to be talking about Season 3 episode. I believe we're on episode number 9 now, called The Dress. And, wow, guys, an amazing episode. Now, if you have caught my reviews before, you know that one thing I've been bringing up the last several episodes is that they have been really slowing down on the Superman aspect when it comes to Superman and Lois. Like, there's plenty of Clark Kent, and there's plenty of Clark Kent basically being Superman, just not, you know, doing any fighting. Basically, when it comes to the action part of Superman, it feels like they've really been kind of lacking there. And that's not to say it's a bad thing. It definitely isn't, because I think when you have some good writing, you don't necessarily need expensive special effects to keep someone entertained throughout an entire episode. And I think that's one thing this season has been doing really well. Even if we're light on the action, there is plenty of good writing to keep us entertained throughout. And the same can definitely be said here, except for this time we have that good writing that we all know and love from the show, and the Superman action has returned. That's right, we got some really great Superman fight scenes going on in this episode, and I'm definitely excited to break it all down for you guys. But first, I do kind of want to talk about the weaker aspect of the episode. Not that it was bad, but just more, I thought this was something that we kind of wrapped up last week, but it turned out it was still kind of going on this week, and that is the conflict between Jordan and Jonathan Kent. Now, in the previous episode, Jonathan Kent, you know, got his first mission as a fireman volunteer, and his task was really just to stay by the fire truck in case they needed something. But of course, Jordan, in the middle of, you know, doing his Superboy stuff, ended up kind of ruining that for Jonathan, causing Jonathan to look like he couldn't do his job and making him come off as more of a liability to Kyle Cushing. And so Jonathan has temporarily, possibly permanently going forward, we still don't know yet, he might lose his job. Basically, he might lose you know, this thing that he was actually quite passionate about and seemed like he was you know, starting to just get the hang of. So you know, that's going on with him. And then you have Jordan, who's very, you know, he's apologetic about it, don't get me wrong, but he also is trying to get Jonathan to lie for him, on top of the fact that he, you know, just got Jonathan fired. It's like, you know, he got Jonathan fired and he's trying to get Jonathan to not tell you know, Lois and Clark about it. So you can only imagine how pissed off Jonathan must be throughout the entire episode. So I'm not trying to say that the conflict was bad because it didn't make sense for either character. It definitely did. I thought that for the most part, I didn't actually see anything wrong with the conflict between the two of them. I think it made a lot of sense. Again, I just was confused because it kind of seemed like they ended things on good terms in the previous episode, and that's why I kind of put it as like the weakest aspect of the episode so far for me. That being said, I am very curious on how this is going to end up biting both of them in the ass later on, because you know, if superhero shows have shown us one thing, is that lies rarely have no consequences. So the fact that they're keeping this from Superman and Lois, or, you know, from their parents, I feel like this is definitely going to bite them in the ass later on. But I do feel like there's an interesting solution here, and I'm curious if the characters are going to see this as well. We'll have to wait and see going forward. But it is interesting to me that they don't think to just tell Kyle Cushing about Jonathan. I mean, or sorry, about Jordan, because it's as far as we know, Kyle is the only one who knows that there's someone with powers going around in Smallville. As far as we know, he's the only one who suspects this. Now, he may have told other people about this, but I don't think anyone else has the same suspicions that he does. So that being said, it would be kind of interesting if they just cued Kyle in on this, like, later on. I mean, he's definitely someone we know that they can trust, and not to mention, like, literally everyone in his life kind of knows about it already, except for the younger daughter, whose name I totally forgot. I believe Sophia was her name. Yeah, I believe, like, he and Sophia are like the only two people out of, like, you know, the main characters that don't know that you know, Clark Kent is Superman and that Jordan has powers. So, you know, that's my idea of what would be the easiest solution for, you know, this current issue. The next thing I wanted to bring up is, of course, you know, the big Lois Lane storyline, because it ties in with both Clark and Lois, or Clark and Lana. I'll first talk about what happens between her and Lana, and then I think with her and Clark, I'll save that till the very end of the review. But basically, Lois is about to have a mastectomy, and it is something that is terrifying her, even more than going through, you know, the 4 stages of chemo, which is very understandable. And this is something that Clark is having a hard time relating to with Lois, obviously, because not only is he not a woman, but it's also not his body that's going to be going through this. So it's like, it's not that Clark is avoiding the topic, it's just that he really doesn't know how to talk to Lois Lane about her, and unless she's the one to open up to him, he's not going to be able to really figure out, you know, exactly how to you know, comfort her pretty much in this whole thing. So this is where I think bringing Lana in was a very smart idea by the writers. You know, if anyone can really comfort her, the best person for it to be is definitely Lana. And while, you know, things are still definitely hard with Lois, I do think Lana basically saying that, you know, even though this is, you know, it's going to be Lois's life and Lois's body that changes after this whole thing, I really love Lana just, you know, assuring her that this isn't something that she's going to be, you know, going through alone, that, you know, that everyone in her life will be there for her. And I think one of the more interesting aspects that they even explore is, you know, just kind of how passionate Lois and Superman had been for each other ever since the beginning of their relationship. You know, it seemed that intimacy was a big part of it, but, you know, going through with this surgery, she's worried that things are going to be changing going forward. And not just the fact that, you know, not just her fear that Clark would find her unattractive, because we all know that that is not something that Clark would ever factor in when it comes to a relationship, but it's more just the fact that she's worried that she'll feel, you know, less like being intimate towards Clark, and it's a huge worry that she'll have that she might be, you know, she might continue to be a burden. And I do love that Lana is kind of there to reassure her that Clark will love her no matter what happens going forward. Basically all the writing between Lois and Lana, I think, was absolutely like perfectly done, and it kind of goes to show you it really is important to have a woman in the writing room, especially when you're writing a storyline about a woman going through breast cancer, you know. The next big thing I do want to talk about in this episode is definitely the Jon Henry Irons versus Superman aspect about this, because, you know, it's funny. I love the relationship that's happened between Jon Henry Irons and Clark Kent throughout, like, ever since the beginning to where they are right now. The fact that, you know, it started with Jon Henry Irons absolutely hating Superman's guts, you know, straight up wanting to kill him, to him kind of coming around on Superman, to them kind of being best buddies throughout all of season 2. And now there's a little bit of friction between the two of them over Bruno Manheim and how to handle him, because it feels like both characters have seen two completely opposite sides of this person. You know, we definitely know that Jon Henry Irons has seen Bruno Manheim at his worst, but we also know that Clark Kent has seen, you know, a very different side of Bruno Manheim. He's seen Bruno Manheim at his, you know, best, which is the fact that even though Bruno Manheim is this leader of Intergang, he does genuinely care about his wife, and he does care about making a difference for the people, you know, in Metropolis when it comes to, or not just Metropolis, you know, to the people of the world struggling with cancer in general. This is something he does want to make a huge difference for, and Superman does see that side of him. And this isn't to say that Superman has forgotten who he is or anything like that. He knows that Bruno Manheim is still, you know, the bad guy, basically, but at the same time, he sees a lot of humanity inside Bruno Manheim, and so Superman wants to try to basically reason with Bruno to turn himself in on a human level, but Jon Henry Irons wants to do this in more of a, like, not necessarily a threat, but definitely he does want Jon Henry Irons to know how serious they are. So in the previous episode, when they basically brought Pia to the DOD in order to treat her, they're basically keeping her, obviously, because she is a villain. She's killed many people, so they are keeping her under arrest, and they refuse to let Bruno Manheim see her unless he basically gives all the equipment back to the DOD that he has stolen from them, which, of course, you know, in doing so would prove that he's guilty, and therefore he would, you know, then have a life sentence more than likely, or probably in his case, you know, depending on how many people Intergang is indirectly responsible for killing, likely several life sentences. And of course he completely decides to go against this, and, you know, does everything he can. That's a very basically leader of Intergang type of way to take care of this. He basically tries to react to Jon Henry Irons Irons' proposal with, you know, violence, basically. Whereas later on in the episode, we have Superman, and this is what I think is very interesting about the way this is written. He doesn't change the deal at all. Nothing about what the DoD offered him was different, but the way Superman approached Jon Henry Irons about the thing by reaching out to his humanity side. You know, we didn't get to see it, unfortunately, because Jon Henry Irons led a task force to basically raid his entire home when this went on. But Superman was like that close to cutting a deal with him. Essentially, you know, he almost got Bruno Manheim to basically return all of the DoD's properties and basically turn himself in order to see his wife, you know. And this also isn't just about Jon Henry Irons himself, it's about his kid Mateo. Wow, sorry, not Jen. Wow, sorry. This isn't just about Bruno Manheim. It's also, you know, remember, he has a son who also really wants to see his mom as well. So, you know, this is what Jon Henry Irons is kind of keeping from Bruno Manheim. So so when they end up kind of raiding his entire apartment, right as Superman was about to cut a deal, obviously the trust that Superman almost built up with him is now completely thrown out the window. And surprisingly, Sam Lane of all people actually kind of takes Superman's side on this. You know, it's not the fact that Sam Lane is against, you know, taking affirmative action, but at the same time, you know, if there's another way to, you know, to take care of a conflict like this without the resort of violence or force, you know, it doesn't surprise me too much that Sam Lane would go that direction. So it is kind of, it is interesting because a lot of times you see that the conflict is always with Superman and Sam Lane with the DoD. So it's kind of interesting seeing Superman and Sam Lane kind of on the same page here during this moment. But regardless, Jon Henry Irons, it seems like he is now finally being put behind bars, and that brings us to the next thing about this episode that I wanted to talk about, which is the Romeo and Juliet part of the episode. And by that, of course, I mean Natalie and Mateo. So obviously, caught in the middle of this whole war between Bruno Manheim and Jon Henry Irons is, of course, their children, who, as we saw in the previous episode, you know, this went from small, like, cute little high school crush to now the two of them actually have really strong feelings for each other. In fact, in this episode, Mateo straight up admits that he thinks that he's in love with her. And the relationship, as we kind of saw, is quite beautiful, everything that we've seen so far between the two of them. But unfortunately, neither of them are able to see each other because both of them have their dads keeping a huge eye on both of them. Something I really like is that by the end of the episode, they do find a way to meet up, and this is when, you know, we find out everything that Mateo actually did know about his dad. And now, I was going to have a huge issue if Mateo said that he had zero idea because, you know, again, they make it very clear in this show that Bruno Manheim is a known criminal, even if they don't have any proof on him. So when he mentions that he had heard rumors about his dad, that was actually kind of a big relief for me. I was slightly worried there was going to be a really bad line where he was going to say I had no idea, but thankfully that was not the case. He had, you know, heard rumors about his dad, which makes sense, but no idea about his mom having meta-human powers. But what I also like about the scene is this is where Natalie finds out what Jon Henry Irons had been doing, basically with Mateo's parents, keeping them away from each other, and this basically causes friction between Natalie and Jon at that point. And now, before I get to the final part of the episode, which is, of course, Clark and Lois, I gotta talk about, you know, Henry Miller coming back. Now, I gotta be careful how I talk about Henry Miller, because the last time I used a certain word that got this video, that got my review for the first episode demonetized. So I'm gonna be very careful when I talk about Henry Miller going forward, because I do think that Henry Miller is gonna be playing a bigger part in the next several episodes. Even though it seems like they killed him at the very end of this episode, there is a chance that, you know, just based on what we saw, especially because he was dead last time, he could come back. And there's even rumors about, like, Doomsday appearing in the final episode, and given the way that they've been experimenting on Henry Miller, it wouldn't be surprising to me if, like, the Kryptonian DNA from Bizarro were to mix with Henry Miller and turn him into Doomsday. But regardless, you know, Henry Miller's back with his Superman-like powers, and it looks like they've actually kind of evolved now, because even Superman is kind of struggling with this guy. Now, he's trying to kill Jon Henry Irons, and one kind of question I did have is what happened to the suit? Now, it's been a few weeks since I saw the previous episode, so maybe the suit got destroyed and I totally forgot, but I don't remember the steel suit getting destroyed in the previous episode. So it is kind of funny because we've seen Jon literally be able to put the suit on like in an instant. Like, you know, he straight up pulls an Iron Man, jumps out of a building, and then uses the suit to save him. So it is kind of weird that the suit doesn't come to him in order to save him from Henry Miller. But he luckily does have something else just as good as the suit, if not better, which is his hammer, which, as we have seen in previous episodes, you know, can actually straight up take down Kryptonians. So using it against Jon Henry Miller, it is enough to at least knock him down a little bit. But of course, you know, Superman does try to help to the best of his abilities, but, you know, even Superman gets taken off guard every now and then, so he gets thrown, you know, into the sky. And this is when Jon Henry Miller is about to get, wow, I almost said Henry Miller is about to go after Jon Henry Irons. My bad, because they both have Henry in their name, so I apologize. Two very different people. But anyways, he's about to go after Jon Henry Irons, and that's when Jon Henry Irons deals the final blow with the hammer, which ends up killing him. And this does not make Superman happy, because if there's one thing we all know about Superman, he is not all for killing at all. But that being said, so here's what I find so interesting. It's like I mentioned earlier, there's not really a wrong or right way to go about things between Superman and Jon Henry Irons. Whichever side you're kind of taking between the two of them, honestly, I can't blame you one way or another. Like me, I think I'm definitely leaning more towards Superman's side, and that's only because we saw that his strategy actually worked, pretty much. But the second part of the debate was definitely at the very end of the episode, where I hear people like talking about whether or not you know, Jon Henry Irons should have killed Henry Miller the way he did. To me, I didn't think he really had a choice. To me, it felt completely like self-defense. Like, I get what the writers were going for. They are trying to show that, you know, Jon Henry Irons doesn't really see Bruno Manheim or Intergang at all as, like, you know, people worth saving. And so there is probably the question of, was there a way Jon Henry Irons could have put Henry Miller down without, like, killing him? And to me, I'm not sure. To me, the blow that Henry Irons does on Henry Miller, it didn't seem like it was a purposely lethal blow. It seemed like a I don't want to die type of blow. So to me, you know, I'm kind of on Superman's side in the first half of the episode for sure. When it came to how to handle Bruno Manheim, I do think that overall Superman was definitely in the right. He knew the better way to go about things. When it came to the fight with Henry Miller, I'm kind of with Jon Henry Irons on this. I don't think Jon Henry Irons intentionally killed him out of anger. I think he killed him to survive. That's how it came off. Now, the one thing that's kind of like, you know, disproving that is, of course, the fact that you know, the previous scenes in the episode kind of say something very different. But to me, if I'm judging just that scene on its own, it kind of looks more like self-defense more than anything else. But definitely let me know what you guys think when it comes to that scene, because I'm very curious. And overall in the overall episode, would you say that you are Team Superman or Team Steel? Definitely curious to hear your thoughts. You know, this is very much very similar to a Team Captain America, Team Iron Man thing, like in Captain America Civil War. Although in here, it's a lot more grounded and you know, all revolving around someone who both Superman and Steel kind of agree is a criminal, rather than it being someone like Bucky Barnes in Civil War. Yeah, weird comparison, but you know, I do think that's where a little bit of the inspiration kind of comes from. And it's kind of funny too, because this isn't the only time it feels like Superman and Lois has taken a little bit of inspiration from Marvel. I mean, when you look at Morgan Edge or Tal-Rho, whichever you want to call him, when you look at the relationship between Tal-Rho and Superman, come on, just try to watch that without thinking of Thor and Loki. You can't do it because it's so similar. So it is kind of funny. A couple of interesting things that they're taking from the Marvel Universe. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't mean like they're ripping it off, but there definitely are some similarities I've started noticing between the two of them, you know, that I think are kind of interesting. Well done, though. You know, again, it's not like they're ripping Marvel off, but the similarities are there, and I'm definitely going to point them out as I see them going forward. Now, the final thing, of of course, we got to talk about with this episode is definitely Clark and Lois Lane. Because wow, do things get really dramatic. Because the entire episode, one thing I never brought up during this review is that there are flashbacks during this episode. Flashbacks to 17 years ago, right before Lois and Clark's wedding. And we find out that Lois Lane has been nominated for an award. I can't remember the name of the award. It was like the Metas or something, or Metis, I think. But basically it's like an award show, but for journalists. And I don't know if this is like something that exists in the real world. It probably does, because Superman and Lois tends to use like real world kind of things more. But that being said, she's nominated for it. She's kind of hesitant on going because she sees it as kind of like a joke more than anything else. She doesn't see it as real journalism. But she changes her mind when she sees that Clark has gotten her this amazing dress. And throughout the flashbacks, we see her kind of being nervous in the dress, you know, thinking that, you know, maybe the dress just isn't for her, but Clark, you know, reassuring her that she looks incredibly beautiful in the dress. And then kind of, you know, one thing that we see in present day that she brings up about the dress, of what made it so special back then, is going to get her award. She felt so beautiful, not because she looked amazing in the dress, but because she was going there looking incredible, but still being admired for her mind. It was, as she puts it, it made her feel more powerful than anything else. So the dress definitely had a lot of sentimental value towards her. Not to mention, Superman did sell his entire baseball card collection in order to buy it. A line that I thought was really funny, especially because it was brought up twice in the episode. Overall, you know, just a really big dress, and Lois is wanting to give it away to charity. She doesn't feel comfortable holding on to it anymore. She feels like someone else would probably make a better use out of it more than her. So this, of course, is very concerning to both Clark and Lois. And eventually she does decide to keep the dress, but of course she just kind of doesn't feel like she could see herself really wearing it after the surgery. And this is when you have just such a beautiful, intimate moment between the two of them. And by intimate this particular time, I am not talking about sex. I mean just intimate as in them just really opening up with each other, Lois and Clark, that is. And basically Lois just telling Clark all of her fears about having the surgery, what it might mean for their marriage going forward, and Clark just kind of reassuring her that, you know, they have been through so much and that nothing can really, you know, stand between their marriage. Not anything like, you know, the big thing that Clark brings up to Lois Lane is that it wasn't her body that he fell in love with. It was Lois Lane as a person that he fell in love with. You know, and he brings up the idea that, you know, the scars are just kind of like symbols of what we've survived, and he won't see Lois Lane any differently, really. He'll just see her as a survivor and, you know, nothing else. He'll still see her as the exact same Lois Lane. Now, I worded it very differently from how he worded it in the episode, but that being said, it was such a beautiful moment in the episode that it genuinely almost got a tear out of me. But if that didn't get a tear, what did was the next scene afterwards. So, okay, I'm not usually a romance person when it comes to superhero movies, or just in movies in general. Like, I do love a funny rom-com every now and then, but when it comes to like romantic dramas or stuff like that, it's just not my cup of tea personally. But that being said, man, there was a moment at the end of the episode where Superman takes Lois flying, and, you know, the 1978 Superman movie, everyone says the flying scene between Lois and Superman is the most romantic thing in the world. No. This episode had one of the most romantic kisses I think I have ever seen in anything. And that even includes, you know, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. Again, another kiss that people say was super iconic, the upside down kiss. No. The kiss at the end of this episode is probably one of the most beautiful, like, kisses I think I have ever seen. And this isn't something I normally comment on. Like, when it comes to kissing scenes in, like, movies and TV shows, I could care less about them most of the time. It's not that I'm grossed out by them. It's just that I just don't care most of the time. This particular episode, wow, was one of the most heartwarming moments like in the show, and I absolutely loved it. And it makes me sad that this was in a TV show, because if this was in a Superman movie, I'm telling you guys, this would actually be probably ranked up there with some of the most iconic kisses in cinema if this was like a movie and not a TV show. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful moment. Yeah. So I think that basically kind of covers everything that I loved about this episode. So I do have a nitpick that I wanted to bring up a couple of times, but it just, I wanted to wait just to see where the show was going to go a little bit more before I brought this up. But I think I do have a nitpick when it comes to the production side of things. When it comes to Elizabeth Tulloch, she is giving an amazing performance. You know, I've been saying this since season 1 that this actress needs an Emmy. Like, holy shit, she is incredible as Lois Lane. She needs an Emmy for the show. Even if the show itself doesn't get nominated for an Emmy, Elizabeth Tulloch needs an Emmy for her performance as Lois Lane. That being said, I do think the makeup department could use a lot of improvement, because she looks exactly the same as she did in the beginning of the season, as she did in the beginning of Superman and Lois, and she is on her 3rd round of chemo. It does not look like she is on her 3rd round of chemo. She looks exactly the same, and I don't know if it's maybe because, like, you know, adding, like, I know a bald cap isn't really hard to do, but obviously she wouldn't be bald at this point at all, but she would be losing some of her hair, and they even mentioned through dialogue that she's losing some of her hair, so maybe doing that is a bit too challenging for the show's, like, makeup department. I don't know. But it is something I really kind of think they need to improve on. She's about to go into her 4th round of chemo, and she looks, again, you know, she's doing a great performance. When it comes to, like, the way she kind of presents herself, the fact that she always looks absolutely exhausted, you know, I think she's selling that extremely well. I think the makeup department is what's kind of holding her back, though. So I do kind of hope there's a little bit of an improvement on that going forward. I was really hesitant to bring this up in the review just because I know it's very typical. Oh, a man judging, you know, a woman on her makeup and things like that. But in this particular case, I don't think it's sexist for me to say that, you know, I think they could do a little bit more to actually make her look like she's sick. But I don't know. If you think that's, you know, nitpicking too much, definitely let me know in the comments below. But I think it's a valid critique personally. But that all being said, overall, you know, one of the best episodes this season so far. Great episode. If there was like really an example to show someone of what works about Superman and Lois, this is definitely like probably an episode I would show them. You know, but overall, those are just my A+ opinions. We here at A+ Opinions want to know what you guys think, so definitely let me know your overall thoughts of the episode in the comments below. Do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. But of course, guys, above all, don't forget to keep it A+, and we'll talk to you all later. Goodbye.